Don't you dare touch that! He growled, voice low, half ravaged by thirst and half by impatience. He crouched behind a half-collapsed steel column, eyes on the lithe silhouette bathed in pale lavender glow. Her arms were raised as though reaching for some relic. For all he knew, it might have been a weapon. The ruins of the outpost around them smelled of dust and distant fires. He had been following her for the last hour, tracking a faint shimmer of bioluminescent patterns that pulsed across her bare shoulders and down the slender length of her arms. He could not stop himself from admiring the interplay of shifting lights on her skin, a living tapestry that pulsed in rhythm with her breath. Still, the words came out rough, as if he had an urgent need to reassert that he was in control, or at least wanted to be. She turned slowly, eyes glowing silver in the dim corridor. She resembled nothing he had ever known. Certainly not any species recognized by the Terran expedition logs in his battered data bracelet. Her features were angular, but softened by some delicate glow around her cheekbones. Her full lips parted. He thought she might hiss. Instead, she spoke in a voice like midnight wind against metal gates. You assume I want to touch it because I can't resist. A small laugh escaped her, a deliberate sound that passed between them like a secret. If you wanted it to remain untouched, you would not be here. He swallowed. She was right in a way. He was here because it was rumored these ruins held precious mineral shards, rare contraband that corporate slavers would pay a fortune for. Or kill for. He was no saint, but he had his reasons, the kind that weighed heavy in the pit of his stomach. Survival made a man do things he'd never have dreamed of. I said back away, he repeated, voice shaking like a man uncertain whether it was best to fight or flee. She raised a brow. A subtle luminescent wave traveled across the ridges along her neck. He couldn't tell if those ridges were gills, decorative scales, or some combination. Either way, they were mesmerizing. You use words to keep distance, she observed. But your eyes, they come closer. Something in him caught fire at that. He closed his mouth, unable to summon a witty retort. She turned her attention back to the battered crate half buried under rubble. There must have been ancient technology, or something of major value inside. Her fingers, which ended in slight, almost delicate claws, traced the edge of the crate with audible fascination. He shifted his weight, feeling heat creep up his neck. He'd left his jacket behind when a sudden attack forced him to scramble through vents just to lose a couple of bounty hunters on his tail. He was sweaty, filthy, the adrenaline still humming through his bloodstream. Yet here she stood, glimmering in the darkness like a living constellation, unafraid, eyes full of curiosity. He found himself torn between intimidation and an unexpected surge of protectiveness. This is my find, he murmured, once more trying to hold on to the upper hand. I came here first. So you believe? Her tone was calm, so certain of itself. She glanced back at him, a flash of humor in her luminous gaze. I have been here before. I know these hallways, these rusted gates. She leaned closer to the crate, pressing a palm to it. More swirling lights cascaded down her arm. He had the fleeting thought that maybe the glow was responding to some emotional signal he could not interpret. Whatever value you think you'll find, it is worthless if you don't survive long enough to sell it. He clenched his jaw, scanning the corridor for any sign of approach from behind. The outpost was infamous for its predators, both of the local fauna variety and the two-legged variety. That's why we need to get out of here, he said. I'm not dying for this. Not anymore. She cocked her head, like she was deciding whether to trust him. Then she stepped aside, leaving the crate unopened. Go ahead. It's yours. He muttered a curse under his breath as he brushed dirt from his knees and approached, stepping carefully around debris. He half expected a trap. The illusions of these ancient halls could be savage, illusions that made you see and feel something not entirely real. Yet when he pried open the ancient crate, all he saw inside was a coil of inert cables and a single triangular device, its surface a dull reflection of the corridor. Not what I hoped for, he said, glaring at it. Might be useless. She stayed close, too close, her presence a phantom heat at his shoulder. Her fragrance was startling, reminiscent of sea salt and exotic blooms. He wondered if she produced pheromones, or if it was just how she smelled. You came looking for a fortune, she teased gently. But the real fortune of these ruins is knowledge. Technology that can shift entire civilizations from ruin to rebirth. He let out a bark of laughter, but it caught in his throat because she was gazing at him with the kind of intensity that made him feel strangely seen. What's your name? He asked, wanting to break the tension. She blinked, parted her lips as if tasting the question. My name is Kryn. He nodded. I'm Rovin. He tested out her name silently for a moment. Kryn. It felt like an invocation, something that might open a locked door or call forth a hidden storm. Why are you roaming these corridors? If you know so much, can't you scavenge the best pieces on your own? Kryn moved with uncanny grace, stepping around him. Her bare feet made no sound on the dusty metal floor. Each motion seemed precise, as if she existed in a slightly different gravity. I do not scavenge, she said, flipping one hand in a graceful gesture that made the ridges along her arm flex. I search for relics that belong to my people. We once had a settlement here, long before the corporations, the wars, and the scavengers like you. Everything fell to ruin. But I still hope to reclaim what was taken. He closed the crate and tried not to feel any guilt. She just called him a scavenger, which was accurate enough. He'd been many things: soldier, fugitive again, and now something between a mercenary and a freebooter. Yeah, well, I only do this because life doesn't give me choices. Life always gives choices, she said. Her tone was not condemning, more like a gentle correction. You just cannot always see them. He opened his mouth to argue when a distant roar echoed from a collapsed corridor. He stiffened. That was too close. We should leave, he said, turning off the flickering beam of his handheld device. That's either a local predator or some hunting drone. Neither is good news. Kryn nodded. For a moment, her hand brushed his forearm. He was surprised at the warmth of her skin. A shiver moved through him, unbidden. There's a place deeper in these halls where we can hide, she said. If you can keep quiet and follow me. Rovin felt his heart hammer. Why was he reacting to her? She was alien, different. He'd known other species before, but none had ever drawn him in this manner. He caught himself looking at the shimmering lines across her shoulders, the way her chest rose and fell with subtle breath. He forced himself to keep it professional. She was a stranger in a dangerous place. Lead on, he whispered. She turned and padded down a side corridor, her illuminated patterns casting dancing shadows on the walls. He followed, not sure if she was truly a friend or if she had her own hidden agenda. The corridor was narrow, forcing them to keep close, his shoulder nearly brushing her back at each step. He could smell her again, heady, tropical, like the memory of a faraway ocean. The urgency of escaping potential danger only heightened the intimate tension simmering between them. They emerged in a small chamber with a slanted ceiling, half collapsed from an ancient missile strike. In the far corner, the remains of some ancient console flickered with a faint glow. Kryn knelt beside it, her claws lightly tapping the controls, coaxing the console to reveal hidden passages. He kept watch near the door, hearing his own breath, hearing hers too, softer, more measured. If we can get to the old maglev shaft, she whispered, there may be tunnels beneath the outposts that lead to the surface. Or deeper subterranean routes, if we're unlucky. Rovin nodded, noticing that her neck ridges pulsed with a new pattern whenever she concentrated. The swirl of faint blue and pink lights was strangely hypnotic. You really know your way around. I said I was here before. She paused, then added more quietly. I was exiled, returned to find something I lost. I had no idea a man like you would stumble upon me in these halls. Perhaps it's fate. He let out a shaky chuckle. He wanted to press her, to ask about her exile, about her past. But it felt too raw, too soon, and the moment was loaded enough. Let's find that shaft then, he said. He offered her a hand up from the console, and she took it, her fingers curled around his with unexpected firmness. Something electric crackled in the touch, a collision of energy. Her gaze flickered to his face, and for a moment the silence pulsed with a shared awareness. They were together, alone, with no immediate promise of rescue. Kryn turned, leading him through a half-jammed door into a corridor choked with twisted metal. The floor was uneven, rusted beams protruding. She placed her feet with such care, but he stumbled a few times, once nearly falling until she caught his arm. "Easy," she whispered, her breath playing across his ear. His heart thrummed at the closeness of her voice. They finally reached a dark vertical tunnel, the air thick with dust. A collapsed door hung precariously overhead, and an old ladder led up into a blackness that smelled like the inside of a tomb. "No power," he muttered, shining his small glow rod. "No telling how stable that old lift shaft is." Kryn tested the ladder, gave a nod. "Stable enough. We can climb, if we go slowly," he agreed, swallowing down a sudden wave of claustrophobia. He gestured for her to go first, which she did without complaint. The narrow shaft forced them close, her bare feet on the rungs just above where his hands gripped. Even in the gloom, her bioluminescent patterns glowed faintly, and he could see them shifting like living tattoos. After a few rungs, the closeness of her legs in front of his face had him hyper-aware of every detail. He cursed himself for being so easily distracted. This was no time for lust, but his body didn't seem to care. They climbed higher. At one point she paused, looking down over her shoulder. Her eyes caught him in that faint light. "Why are you blushing?" she asked, curious. She sounded more intrigued than offended. He coughed. "The heat in here, that's all." A small smirk curved her lips, and she resumed climbing. They ascended maybe 4 stories, stopping periodically to test the ladder's integrity. Above them, a hole in the ceiling opened into another corridor. She hoisted herself up, then leaned down to pull him through. The corridor overhead was narrower, and to their left, the metal had torn open to reveal a small ventilation duct leading into darkness. The roar sounded again, closer this time, echoing somewhere behind the walls. Rovin's skin went cold. He exchanged a glance with Kryn. "We keep moving," she said simply. They scrambled into the duct. It was an awkward fit for him, but she moved gracefully on all 4s, her body shifting with serpentine poise. The glow from her ridges faintly illuminated the path ahead. His pulse raced. This was beyond dangerous. If whatever lurked in these corridors found them now, they'd be cornered. Yet with Kryn's warmth in front of him, the tension only grew more potent. He struggled to focus on survival rather than the mesmerizing sway of her body. After what felt like an eternity, the duct opened into a hidden chamber. Dim emergency lights glowed overhead, flickering in and out. He realized it might have been a storage room or living quarters once, as there were half-rotted bunks lining the walls, a few ancient footlockers, and the stale smell of old sweat. Kryn climbed down from the duct, landing lightly. Rovin followed, scanning the space for threats. "Seems empty," he noted. He dusted himself off, frustration mingling with relief. "Now we just have to find a safe path out of here before something else finds us." Kryn walked to one of the bunks, a small swirl of light passing across her collarbones. "We might be safer waiting here for a little while. If that creature is roaming the corridors, continuing blindly might be worse." Her eyes flickered to meet his. "If we wait, we can gather strength. Then we'll move." He agreed, though the idea of resting in such a place put him on edge. He paced the room, trying to calm down. She watched him quietly, leaning against the bunk. He felt her gaze, intense and assessing. He fought the urge to stare back at her bare torso, which was only partially covered by thin, tattered wrappings that resembled some old garments. It occurred to him that they were alone, truly alone, with no immediate threat in this sealed chamber, and the realization made his heart pound. "Rovin," she said softly. "Sit down. You're too tense." He hesitated, then moved to sit on a bunk across from her. Neither spoke for a few moments. The hum of the flickering lights gave a static hush to the air. He observed the slow rise and fall of her breath, saw the shifting pulses of light along the length of her thighs, where faint patterns glimmered in the gloom. She was unlike anyone he met, but the vulnerability in her expression, her parted lips, the slight tremor when she exhaled, reminded him they were both in peril, both in need of connection, even if only for solace. As the silence stretched, Kryn finally asked, "Have you known many of my kind?" He shook his head. "None." A faint smile curved her mouth. "You keep looking at me." He flushed again, but didn't deny it. "You glow," he said with a half-laugh that felt almost shy. "It's impossible not to stare. On my world, our patterns shift with emotion," she explained, tracing a finger along one of the glowing lines on her arm. "Joy, anger, sorrow. Attraction." Her finger paused over a faint pinkish swirl near her collarbone. She didn't elaborate on what emotion that particular hue might represent, but he had a guess. He cleared his throat, trying to let the tension recede. "Why did they exile you?" A shadow passed behind her eyes. "I defied a sacred tradition," she admitted. "My role demanded certain obedience, and I refused to partake in an arranged bonding that would have sacrificed my freedom. So I came here, seeking a piece of my ancestors' technology to prove my worth. To show that we don't need archaic rules to guide our destiny." Her words resonated with him more than he expected. He understood the feeling of being cornered by life, forced to make harsh decisions. "I was a soldier once," he confided, not sure why he was telling her. "I did things I regret. I deserted when I realized I was just a pawn." His jaw tightened with the weight of memories. "Now I survive how I can, crossing the galaxy in old ships, rummaging through ruins." Kryn reached out and placed her hand on his knee, a gesture of empathy. He nearly jolted at the warmth of her touch, the intimacy of it. They were practically strangers, yet in the dim hush of this forgotten place, it felt like they were the only two souls in the universe. She said nothing, but her eyes spoke volumes. The swirling lights across her skin brightened, a gentle pink undertone weaving through the glowing patterns. He let out a shaky breath. There it was again, that crackle of energy whenever they touched. It was as if something in her biology sang to something in his. Before he could stop himself, he reached up to tuck a stray length of her dark hair behind her ear. She leaned into his touch, her eyes drifting closed for the briefest of moments. The roar rumbled again in the distance, reminding them of the danger. Yet they were safe for the moment, locked in this narrow room with no onlookers. His heart hammered. He wanted to kiss her, to lose himself in the swirl of lights, to forget the desperation of his existence. But the heat of desire warred with a deeper caution. "We should be careful," he murmured, though his voice betrayed how much he wanted it. She smiled, leaning in. "Careful is wise. But sometimes, there is only now." Her lips hovered near his, and he felt the faint shimmer of her breath. 1,000 unspoken words flickered in his mind, but all he could do was close the gap. The first press of their lips was gentle, exploratory. Her mouth was soft, warmer than he expected. He felt her body shift closer, and the faint glow from her chest intensified, a pastel flush that spread across her torso, reflecting arousal. She made a small sound in the back of her throat, and he felt that sound vibrate through him. The kiss deepened, the taste of her mouth a strange, addictive sweetness he couldn't name. He slid an arm around her waist, drawing her onto his lap. Her body fit against him in ways that made his mind reel. A million questions about logistics, about differences in their species, evaporated under the sheer wave of desire that rolled through him. Her hands slid up his shoulders, her claws grazing him lightly, sending sparks of sensation. He felt the desperation to be close, to lose himself in her warmth. But somewhere deep inside, he reminded himself there was no telling how far this should go. They were hidden away, threatened by an unknown beast, uncertain of their next move. Yet the moment burned so brightly. He hesitated, trying to find words, but all that emerged was a breathless exhale. Her lips trailed across his jaw, lingering at his ear. "We can wait," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "We can want this, but we do not have to rush." He closed his eyes, anchoring himself in the sensation of her weight on his thighs, her glowing pattern shimmering against his chest. He wondered if she could feel his heart pounding. I thank you, he managed, stunned that she seemed to sense his hesitation. I want it, but I don't want to ruin it. Kryn nodded, sliding off his lap and settling beside him, her breathing still uneven. Then we wait. Survival first. Then we see. He almost wanted to protest, to pull her back into his arms. But the roar came again, louder, and distant clangs echoed through the corridor. Both of them startled, adrenaline flooding in. Without another word, they readied themselves. Kryn found a bent metal rod she could use as a makeshift spear, while Rovan checked the battered sidearm at his hip. They nodded at each other, time to move. Slipping back into the corridor, they discovered the power in the outpost flickering, as if something had tampered with the energy relays. Sparks flared from overhead cables. The air smelled of burned circuitry. They kept low, scanning corners. Their footsteps echoed in the emptiness, setting Rovan's nerves on edge. Every shadow seemed to loom. Kryn pressed a hand lightly to his back at one intersection, guiding him with careful instincts. They slipped through another half-collapsed door, entering a large central chamber dotted with pillars. The floor was littered with broken crates, severed cables, shards of glass. Their cautious steps crunched softly. The tension in the air felt nearly suffocating. Kryn's patterns glowed faintly, and Rovan saw that her pink flush of desire had dimmed, replaced by sharper tones of apprehension. A scuttling noise made them freeze. Something large and many-legged crept along the far wall, half hidden in shadows. Rovan felt sweat trickle down his temple. The creature's exoskeleton glinted in the dim light. He counted at least 8 limbs. Some pale fluid dripped from its mandibles. It made a hollow clicking noise that reverberated across the chamber. The beast's black eyes seemed to reflect the faint glow from Kryn's skin, and it hissed, antennae snapping in their direction. Kryn whispered, "Stay behind me." He knew he should argue. He had the sidearm, but the conviction in her voice was unshakable. She gripped the metal rod like a spear, stepping forward with controlled purpose. The creature hissed again, and a second, smaller one scuttled out from behind a pillar. Rovan cursed silently. They were outnumbered, cornered. It happened fast. The larger creature lunged with startling speed. Kryn met it, jabbing forward with the rod. The tip glanced off the exoskeleton, sparking. At the same time, Rovan leveled his pistol at the smaller one, squeezing off 2 shots. The blast echoed in the chamber, bright flashes in the gloom. The smaller beast collapsed, its exoskeleton cracked. The larger monstrosity let out a shriek, recoiling from Kryn's spear, then turned its aggression on Rovan. He fired again, but it moved too quickly, skittering sideways. A claw slashed at his leg, and he staggered back with a cry, pain spiking. Kryn pivoted, jamming the rod beneath the creature's mandibles. She let out a guttural snarl, her entire body bracing. The glow along her arms flared bright, and she leveraged her strength to impale the beast. Its shriek died into a gurgle. Panting, they stood over the carcasses. Rovan's leg burned, and he saw blood soaking his pants. Kryn dropped the makeshift spear, rushing to kneel at his side. Her eyes were wide, luminous with concern. "You're hurt." He gritted his teeth, wincing. "It's just a cut." But when he put weight on it, he realized the slash was deeper than he'd hoped. "Damn." She tore a strip from her minimal clothing, pressing it to the wound. "We need to treat this." Her eyes darted around, seeking a safer place. A door on the other side of the chamber stood ajar, flickering lights visible inside. "There." He leaned on her as they crossed the broken floor, each step sending sharp jolts of pain up his thigh. Blood trickled through her makeshift bandage. Inside the adjacent room, a half-functional medical station glowed faintly. She eased him onto a bench that threatened to collapse, then rummaged through the overhead cabinets. Most had been looted, but she found a few bandages and a small canister of antiseptic foam. "This might sting," she whispered, crouching at his side. He clenched his jaw, nodding. She carefully peeled back the fabric from the wound. The slash was ugly, the edges ragged, but not as catastrophic as he feared. Gently, she applied the antiseptic foam, and pain flared bright, forcing a grunt from his throat. Her free hand curled around his, a grounding gesture that pulled him through the sting. "Almost done," she murmured, voice low and comforting. He stared at her as she worked, enthralled by her focus, the lines of her face, the gentle curve of her mouth. How was it that in the midst of so much chaos, she still managed to bring him a sense of calm? Her ridges glowed with a subdued pink undertone, and he thought again about the meaning of that color. Desire, attraction, concern, or all three woven together. When she finished, she looked up, meeting his gaze. Their faces were inches apart. He couldn't help himself. He lifted a hand to her cheek. Her eyes fluttered shut, and she leaned into his touch. Every heartbeat felt magnified by the closeness, by the gentle hum of electric tension that held them captive in the moment. "Thank you," he breathed. She opened her eyes, and for a moment, he swore he saw a reflection of his own longing in them. "You saved me, too," she whispered, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. He swallowed hard, ignoring the pain in his leg as best he could. He wanted nothing more than to draw her close again, to lose himself in her warmth. But the ancient medical station beeped ominously, and the overhead lights flickered wildly, pulling them back to the reality of their surroundings. "We're not safe here. We need to find a way out." Kryn helped him stand. He tested weight on the leg, wincing but managing. She offered him her shoulder for support, and they limped out of the medical room, stepping carefully around the remains of the two creatures in the central chamber. A metallic tang filled the air. Rovan suppressed a shudder, forging ahead. They found another corridor leading away from the central chamber, less collapsed than the others. The hum of power was faint, as though the outpost systems were on the verge of total shutdown. At intervals, the lights above flickered, revealing glimpses of old signage in a language Rovan didn't recognize. Some might have been Kryn's native script, or an older dialect. Every so often, they stopped to listen for any sign of more creatures or patrolling drones. The silence felt ominous. Rovan's leg throbbed, sending beads of sweat trickling down the back of his neck. Kryn kept her arm around him, guiding him gently. He couldn't help but rest a hand on her waist, feeling the steady play of her muscles under that glowing, scaled skin. Each brush of contact threatened to ignite the banked embers of his desire. He tried to focus on survival, but found his thoughts drifting to the feel of her lips, the taste of her mouth. He caught her eye as they paused at a junction. She gave a faint, knowing smile, the pinkish glow in her ridges intensifying. Then she glanced away, face coloring with her luminous blush. It struck him how unusual this must be for her, too, a meeting of two lonely souls in a place of death and ruin. He wanted to promise her safety, but he couldn't even promise it to himself. They turned a corner and discovered a massive door at the end of the corridor. It bore the insignia of an older corporation, half peeled away, rusted with time. Next to it was a control panel, cracked but possibly functional. Kryn approached, tapping the screen. It flickered, lines of alien script rolling by. She frowned, tried again, then gave a small laugh of disbelief. "It needs a biological key," she said. "A genetic signature from the original inhabitants. Possibly from your species or mine, I can't say. This ruin is so old, the system might be mixing up codes." Rovan grit his teeth. "Is there any other way?" She shook her head, a sense of urgency flashing in her eyes. "I think we have to go through. It might lead to an underground railway or some cargo tunnel that opens to the surface." She placed her palm on the scanner. It buzzed in rejection. "Not recognized," she muttered in frustration. He took a step forward, ignoring the ache in his leg. "Let me try." He pressed his hand to the panel. Nothing. Another beep of denial. "What if we both press together?" he suggested, half joking, half hopeful. Kryn inhaled deeply. "It can't hurt to try." She placed her left hand on the panel, and he placed his right. A surge of static energy passed through them, surprising them both. The screen glowed, then flashed, scanning their hands. For a moment, they thought it failed again. Then an ancient mechanical rumble echoed within the door, and the locks began to disengage, grinding with age. They exchanged a look of astonishment. "You see?" Kryn said softly. Sometimes, we need two different pieces to open the way. The door slid open, revealing a dark corridor stretching downward. Stale air rushed out, carrying an almost chemical smell. But it was a way forward. They crept inside, Rovan leaning on Kryn. He tried to ignore the pounding pain in his leg, focusing on the warmth of her body and the subtle swirl of pink across her skin. She kept a hand around his waist, guiding him with patient strength. As they descended, the corridor opened into a vast sublevel. The walls were lined with pipes, and faint emergency lights cast an eerie red glow. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped. The floor was damp, coated with a thin layer of slime. Rovan tried not to slip. Kryn paused, listening for any sign of danger. When nothing stirred, they moved on. The sublevel forked into multiple passages, some collapsed, others precarious. They chose the largest, hoping it led to an exit. Periodically, they passed old machinery that looked more organic than technological, as if it had once been alive. Kryn whispered that her ancestors had integrated living systems with mechanical constructs. This was a lost art, the kind of relic she had hoped to find. Rovan felt a pang of guilt. He had come here only to scavenge for profit, not caring about the sanctity of what these ruins might mean to someone else. Seeing Kryn's reverent glances at the walls, he wondered if he had been blind to something sacred all along. Eventually, they reached a wide chamber with a sunken floor. Liquid pooled there, shimmering oddly in the red light. Platforms circled the perimeter, leading to a single exit on the other side. Kryn stared at the fluid, her eyes narrowing. "This was part of our old regeneration systems," she explained. "The liquid might be toxic now, or mutated. We'll go around." But as they stepped onto the nearest platform, a shadow unfurled from the darkness overhead. An impossibly large mechanical arm, half encased in corroded plating, swung down with a metallic shriek. Kryn shoved Rovan to the side, and the arm missed him by inches, smashing the floor instead. A robotic monstrosity hung from the ceiling, multiple limbs and mechanical eyes glowing faintly. It seemed to sense them, scanning with a broken lens. "Automated defense system," Rovan gasped, raising his pistol. But the shot fizzled uselessly against the thick plating. Kryn dodged a swing from another arm, the corridor echoing with screeches of rusted metal. She slashed at an exposed wire with her rod, sparking. The machine reeled, but it wasn't destroyed. Another limb swung and caught Kryn across the shoulder, knocking her down. Rovan's heart lurched. He limped forward, firing again at a cluster of gears, searching for a weak spot. Something sparked, and the machine hissed in a shower of mechanical grinding. Kryn rolled to her feet, her bioluminescence flickering with anger. She slammed her rod into a seam of the robot's plating, prying it open. Rovan, seizing the moment, jammed the muzzle of his pistol into the gap and fired repeatedly. The machine jittered, sparks flying. With a final shriek, it crashed onto the platform, half submerged in the glowing liquid. Panting, Rovan sagged against a nearby console. "That was too close." Kryn clutched her shoulder, wincing. "It was an ancient guardian. Probably once used to protect these halls from intruders." She gave him a wry smile, pain etched in her features. "Seems we count as intruders, don't we?" He reached out, pulling her into a brief, impulsive hug. She stiffened at first, then relaxed against him, burying her face in his neck. He could feel her trembling. The near-death encounter had them both rattled. For a moment, they simply held each other, hearts pounding in unison. "We're lucky to be alive," he whispered, pressing his lips to her temple. The impulse to comfort her overshadowed the throbbing ache in his leg. She nodded against him, her breath warm on his skin. "Let's try to make it out of here in one piece," he said, voice low. She withdrew, eyes gleaming with gratitude, their glow tinted by a swirl of pink and azure now. "We will," she promised. Her gaze flicked to a doorway on the far side, the only exit. They helped each other cross the platforms, skirting the pool of alien liquid and the smoking remains of the robot. When they slipped through the next door, it sealed behind them with a hiss, leaving them in a labyrinth of twisting corridors. Some were blocked by cave-ins, others by old security barriers. With Kryn's knowledge and Rovin's stubborn determination, they painstakingly forged onward, keeping each other upright and watchful. Time blurred. They evaded more collapsed tunnels, picking through debris and nearly tripping over broken floor panels. Rovin's leg became a constant throb, and more than once, he had to lean heavily on Kryn just to keep going. She didn't complain, but he could see the worry in her eyes. At one point, she insisted they rest. They found a small alcove in the corridor, a place where the wall had partially crumbled, creating a sheltered nook. Kryn lowered him gently against the wall. "Let me see the wound." Her voice was firm, brooking no argument. He relented, letting her peel back the bandage. The antiseptic foam had hardened, but blood had seeped through in places. She carefully wiped it, applying a fresh layer of foam. He hissed at the sting, gripping her arm. She bit her lip, eyes full of sympathy. "It's not infected. But we must keep it clean." He nodded, swallowing against a wave of dizziness. Her face hovered close to his, her breath brushing his cheek. "Thank you," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She studied him, the flicker of pink lighting her features again. He recognized it as concern and maybe a spark of that earlier desire. "You need more than thanks," she said. "You need healing. Don't know if there's anything left in this ruin that can fix me," he joked bitterly. Her lips curved slightly. "Do you trust me?" He gazed into her luminous eyes. "I don't have a reason not to." She nodded, glancing at the ridges along her arms and neck. "My species has certain abilities. We can promote faster healing in others through close contact, shared breath, and the transmission of specialized enzymes that we secrete when we bond." She hesitated, as if worried how he'd react. His brow furrowed. "Bond? What do you mean, exactly?" She exhaled softly, meeting his gaze with something like vulnerability. "It's a form of intimacy. It can be shared between family, lovers, or those in deep trust. It speeds recovery, but it also creates an emotional link, at least temporarily." She paused, the pink glow intensifying across her collarbones. "I am willing to do it if you wish." His heart pounded. "You're saying if we get more intimate, I might heal faster?" "That is one way to phrase it," she said, a rueful smile touching her lips. "It's not merely sexual, but physical closeness and the exchange of breath is part of the process. It can be extremely personal. I do not offer it lightly." He felt a surge of conflicting emotions. He didn't want to exploit her abilities, nor did he want her to feel obligated. But her eyes shone with genuine willingness, and he recalled how strong their attraction had already been. Perhaps this was a path of both necessity and deepening connection. He swallowed hard, nodding. "If you're sure, if you want this, I won't say no." She leaned in, her voice unsteady. "Then let me show you." It began as a gentle meeting of their foreheads. She closed her eyes, inhaling slowly, and he felt the warmth of her breath mingle with his. The glow across her skin shifted to a deeper shade, something between violet and rose. When she parted her lips and exhaled softly against his mouth, it was like breathing in an elixir of sweet, alien spice. A tingling sensation coursed through his lungs, flowing into his bloodstream. His leg pulsed with warmth. Kryn pressed closer, her body aligning with his. Her mouth found his in a languid kiss, different from before, slower, more deliberate. He tasted her deeper, felt her body trembling with the intensity of the exchange. The swirling lights across her torso lit up the cramped alcove. His senses went hazy, overwhelmed by the flood of sensation. Her lips traced along his jaw, her breath ghosting over his skin, each whisper of contact sending sparks of heat to the wound in his leg. She guided his hands to her waist, settling them there as she eased herself against him. He tried to be mindful of her comfort, but she only pulled him closer, her chest flush against his. His heart pounded so loudly he wondered if she could hear it. A gentle moan escaped her throat as their kisses deepened, and he felt an acute stirring of desire through every nerve. She was so warm, and the sense of her luminous patterns shifting in response to his touch made him dizzy with fascination. A faint hum crackled in the air, as if the outpost itself responded to their closeness. The bond they were forging felt more than physical, it felt like a current of invisible energy wrapping them together. He realized he could sense echoes of her emotion, a mixture of concern, longing, and cautious hope. It radiated through him, mingling with his own tumult of feeling. "Kryn," he whispered against her lips. "I feel you, your thoughts. Is that?" "Yes," she murmured, her eyes half-lidded with rapture. "It's part of the bond. It will fade unless we maintain it." He shuddered in awe, the pain in his leg ebbing to a faint throb. His body felt alive, hyper-aware. His fingers stroked the ridges along her spine, eliciting soft gasps from her. She shifted against him, breath growing ragged, and he realized just how quickly their desire had escalated. They were lost in a swirl of emotion and sensation, the subterranean corridor forgotten. In that heated moment, she pressed her lips to his ear and whispered words that drove a hot spike of longing through him. "Breathe with me." She gently guided his head to her neck, letting him inhale the subtle scent of her skin. There was a primal urgency coiling beneath the surface. She let out a quivering sigh, her own breath shallow. They might have completely succumbed to the passion if not for a sudden, distant clang that echoed through the corridors. Both of them froze, hearts pounding. The reality of their surroundings crashed back. They were in a dangerous ruin, not a safe haven. Their eyes met in a fraught moment of breathlessness. "We should move," she said, voice trembling with desire and fear. "My healing enzymes need time to work. We can't risk staying here and being discovered." He nodded, gingerly testing his leg. To his amazement, the pain had lessened. He could walk more steadily. "Let's keep going," he agreed, though a part of him ached to continue the intimacy. "If we get out of this, I promise we'll finish what we started." She kissed him once more, a lingering taste of promise on her lips. Then they gathered themselves, stepping away from the alcove. His leg felt stronger already, an almost dizzying sense of renewed energy coursing through him. Kryn's patterns glowed with a subdued pink, and he realized her breathing was still uneven, her body brimming with aftershocks of the bond. They navigated a series of twisting hallways, each one littered with debris and the echoes of machines in various states of decay. Occasionally, the corridor would tremble, suggesting deeper structural failures in the outpost. He half expected more automatons or creatures to leap out at them, but the halls remained ominously silent, as if everything else was in hiding. At last, they emerged into a wide space with a large ramp sloping upward. The air smelled marginally fresher, like old rain and dust. Rovin's heart leapt. If that ramp led to the surface, they might finally escape the labyrinth. Kryn placed a cautious hand on the wall, her ridges pulsing in a calmer pattern. "This is an old cargo entrance," she said quietly. "If it's not collapsed, it might open to an exterior hatch." He nodded, glancing around for a control panel. Spotting one near the ramp, he approached. The screen flickered, but responded sluggishly to his touch. Lines of text scrolled by, garbled code. Finally, the system beeped, a low mechanical groan echoing overhead as the ramp flickered with faint lights. "I think it's powering up," Rovin whispered, relief flooding him. Kryn moved beside him, gripping his arm in a tense hold. "If there's an exterior hatch, we have to be ready for what's outside. Could be more dangers, or we might find the corporate thugs you mentioned. Or that unknown predator we heard earlier." He squeezed her hand. "We've come this far." They waited. The ramp rattled, vibrating under their feet. Then it slowly began to rise, revealing a vertical shaft ringed with battered lights. An upper hatch in the distance hissed, letting in a faint glow from what might be outside sunlight or starlight. Rovin's heart pounded. He readied his pistol, feeling Kryn's presence at his side. She held the rod spear in a firm grip. Together they ascended, each step echoing on the metal ramp. As they reached the top, a cool breeze washed over them. They emerged onto an elevated platform partially open to the sky. The scene was both breathtaking and grim, a vast, desolate plain stretching under a twilight sky studded with unfamiliar constellations. The wind carried the scent of alien grass and distant fires. In the distance, twisted spires of metal rose from the ground, remnants of a larger settlement that had once thrived here. Kryn inhaled sharply, stepping forward onto the cracked surface. Her patterns glowed softly in the dim light, a living reflection of her all. Rovan limped onto the platform behind her, legs still tender but functional. The freedom of open air after so many hours in darkness felt like a baptism. "We made it," he said, voice tinged with disbelief. She turned to him, a radiant smile touching her lips, the swirl of pink brightening around her neck. "We did." He glanced around warily. "It can't be this easy. We need to find shelter or a ship, or a place to contact someone." Kryn nodded, scanning the horizon. "My people had a sanctuary some distance from here. I do not know if it stands, but we can try to find it. Or if you have a craft somewhere." He rubbed the back of his neck, recalling he'd stashed a small shuttle on the far side of this broken settlement, behind an old launch tower. But that was many kilometers away, and who knew if it was still intact? "It's a trek," he admitted. "But I have a shuttle. We can see if it's still there." They set off across the plains, leaving the outposts behind. The sky overhead deepened to a cobalt hue, stars brightening like shards of ice. Wind whipped across the barren ground, stirring dust devils that glowed faintly under the planet's strange atmosphere. Kryn led the way with fluid grace, her feet silent on the cracked earth, while Rovan struggled to keep pace on his healing leg. Every so often, she'd pause to let him catch up, her eyes full of concern that was quickly becoming affection. At one point, the wind died down, leaving the landscape eerily quiet. They paused on a small ridge. Far behind them, the ruined outpost slumped like a wounded beast under the twilight. In front of them lay a wide valley, and on the other side, the silhouette of the old launch tower. Rovan's heart clenched with hope. If he could get the shuttle operational, they could leave this blasted place behind. But where would they go? Kryn took his hand, her voice trembling in the hush. "Will you let me come with you?" He glanced at her, surprised. "You don't want to stay and search for your people's relics?" A sadness flickered in her eyes, accompanied by a ripple of dull violet along her ridges. "I do, but not at the cost of losing my life. And I can't stay in exile alone. Not anymore." She stepped closer, her chest almost touching his. "I won't force you, but if you'll have me." His pulse drummed. He rested a hand on her cheek, brushing her glowing skin with a touch that felt reverent. "Kryn, He broke off, words failing him as he recalled how she'd risked everything to protect him. How her lips had awakened a hunger in him he couldn't contain. "I don't want to leave you behind." She exhaled in relief, leaning her forehead against his. The moment stretched in a fragile hush. "Thank you," she whispered, lips curving in a tentative smile. "I'll do whatever I can to help you survive." He tried to lighten the mood, giving a crooked grin. "Well, you already helped me survive a nasty slash. I owe you." Her fingers threaded through his hair in a gesture that felt at once tender and possessive. "You owe me nothing. But we're bound now, at least in part." He thought of the bond, how he had glimpsed her emotions so clearly in that subterranean alcove. A warmth spread through his chest, warring with the bleakness of their surroundings. He wanted to take her in his arms again, to finish what had sparked between them. But the open plains offered no safety, and night pressed in. "We should keep moving," he murmured. They descended into the valley, navigating boulder-strewn slopes that tested Rovan's injury. Occasionally, Kryn would circle back to help him across a tricky patch, her strength evident even in her slender frame. Her luminous markings provided a faint glow, comforting him in the dark. He found himself clinging to that light like a lifeline. The journey took hours. Twice they had to hide from roving searchlights in the sky, possibly corporate patrol ships or slaver vessels. Rovan's leg throbbed anew, forcing him to accept more and more of Kryn's support. By the time they reached the twisted metal remains of the launch tower, dawn was streaking the horizon with pale gold. The tower loomed overhead, half collapsed, a tangle of girders and scaffolding. At its base, hidden by rubble, lay Rovan's shuttle. He'd concealed it under a camouflage net, hoping no one would notice. His heart tightened when he saw the net partially torn away. Someone was here, he muttered, scanning for signs of tampering. They approached cautiously, weapons at the ready. The shuttle, a small craft barely big enough for two, sat exposed. A quick check revealed some scorched marks along one side, but the main hatch was sealed. Rovan tapped a code into the external panel, exhaling in relief when it beeped green. At least it's still locked, he said. Inside, the cramped interior smelled of stale air and old rations. He sealed the hatch behind them, flicking on emergency power. Panels lit up, and a faint hum told him the engines might still have life in them. Kryn hovered near the entrance, eyes roaming the alien interior. For her, this small metal tube must have been incredibly foreign. Rovan slid into the pilot's seat, flipping switches to initiate diagnostics. The battered console flickered, showing a series of red lines. Fuel's low, thrusters are compromised, but maybe we can get into low orbit. He cast Kryn a wary look. You ever flown a Terran shuttle before? She shook her head, stepping closer. But I can learn quickly. He gave her a tired smile. Then we have a chance. Her gaze drifted around the cabin, noticing the small sleeping bunk behind the pilot's chair. She touched the metal bulkhead with curious fingers, then turned to look at him. The pink glow returned to her ridges. We also need rest, she said softly, a slight tremor in her voice. And if the bond is to solidify your healing. Rovan's stomach fluttered at her meaning. We might need more closeness, he finished, the memory of her whispered words echoing in his mind. He found himself recalling how she said breathe me slowly, though that had been more a promise than an immediate request. Yet the memory alone stirred a powerful need. She approached him, every step deliberate, her hips swaying with an unintentional or perhaps fully intentional allure. He stood from the pilot's seat, the small cabin forcing them nearly chest to chest. Her hands drifted to his shoulders. We've earned a moment to breathe, yes? He let out a shaky breath, tension coiling low in his belly. He thought of all the danger they had endured. Right now, in this small shuttle, the only immediate threat was the longing that refused to be ignored. His legs still ached, but he felt the warmth of her healing enzymes cycling through him. The mere brush of her fingertips made him shiver with anticipation. Let's close the shutters, he murmured, flicking a switch that darkened the portholes. We don't want to attract attention. She nodded, eyes glimmering with that dual mix of nerves and hunger. When the cabin dimmed, her bioluminescent patterns became more vivid, painting the cramped walls with shimmering motes of pink and lavender. It was breathtaking. He sank onto the bunk, pulling her down with him, overwhelmed by the sensation of her warm weight across his legs. Kryn's lips found his in a slow, unhurried kiss. He exhaled against her mouth, letting the tension dissolve. She guided his hand to trace the patterns on her ribs, letting him feel how they responded to his touch, flaring with color. A soft sound of pleasure escaped her throat, and he felt his own pulse quicken. Either of them spoke. Words were unnecessary. In that hush, their breath mingled, and their bodies pressed closer. He slid his hands down her waist, exploring the curve of her hips, the texture of her scales near her thighs. She shivered in response, pressing her chest against him. The folds of her minimal clothing fell away easily, revealing more luminous patterns across her stomach and lower. Rovan's heart hammered. He recalled the phrase she had whispered, breathe me slowly, but he realized it wasn't just about raw lust. There was a deeper, almost sacred sense of merging in her species, the exchange of life and possibility. He wanted to respect that, to meet her in that place of intimacy not just with his body but with genuine care. She seemed to sense his hesitation, her gaze softening. Her voice came gentle, just above a whisper. Trust the bond. Let our bodies guide us. And so he did. They moved together, removing the last barriers between them, each inch of revealed skin a tapestry of alien and human difference. Where her body glowed and rippled, his felt heated and flushed. Their kisses deepened, tongues exploring with a tender urgency. She let out a gasp when his lips trailed down her neck, following the swirl of luminescence. He cradled her close, mindful of his healing leg, but she supported him with surprising strength, her thighs bracketing his hips. Every breath he took felt like inhaling a potent mixture of desire and healing energy. The more they melded, the clearer the mental thread between them became, an echo of emotional vulnerability and blossoming devotion. He sensed her longing, her heartbreak at exile, her fear of being alone. She must have sensed his regrets and yearnings, the ghosts of his past that still haunted him. Rather than turning away, she embraced it all, wrapping him in arms that promised acceptance. His hands curved around the small of her back, pressing her against him. Their bodies aligned, and his breath caught at the sensation of her warmth enveloping him. She murmured his name, trembling with a need that resonated in every glowing ridge. He pressed his forehead to hers, taking a moment to savor the intense thrum of connection. "Slow," she whispered, lips brushing his ear, voice trembling with emotion. "We can be slow. There is no one here but us." He closed his eyes, letting the simple truth wash over him. The moan that broke from his lips was raw, a testament to the pent-up desire unraveling inside him. With deliberate care, he guided her hips, and she sank down onto him. The moment of joining was sweet agony, bodies and breath colliding in a surge of shared heat. Her nails dug into his shoulders, and she hissed softly, not in pain but in pleasure so acute it bordered on exquisite torment. Time blurred as they fell into a rhythm of gentle thrusts and fluid motion. She rocked against him, every shift of her body drawing a fresh wave of light across her skin. He marveled at it, enthralled by the living galaxy of her. She leaned forward, capturing his mouth in a desperate kiss that conveyed both hunger and something heartbreakingly tender. In that raw, intimate dance, their bond flared bright in his mind, showing him flashes of images. Her home world's shimmering seas, the vast coral spires where her people once held court, the sorrow of her departure. He glimpsed his own memories reflecting back, the smoky battlegrounds he'd fled, the lost friends, the gritty desperation of his scavenger life. Yet in the swirl of pain and regret they discovered something new, the spark of hope, of renewal. His breath caught as a wave of intense pleasure washed through him. She clung to him, whispering words in her language that sounded like an invocation. Her body trembled, and he felt a deep, almost spiritual glow emanate from her. The bond tightened, pulses of shared ecstasy weaving them together until he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. "Breathe," she reminded, her voice like a trembling lullaby. He did, inhaling her breath in perfect unison, letting the last threads of tension unravel in a rush of climax that thundered through him. They clutched each other, gasping, hearts pounding as one. Her ridges flared with brilliant pink and gold, the colors dancing across the cramped shuttle's walls. When the final shutters eased, she collapsed against his chest, spent and shaking. He wrapped his arms around her, pressing kisses to her glowing neck. The sense of closeness was profound, as if they'd known each other for years instead of mere hours. He realized he felt stronger, the ache in his legs subsiding further, replaced by a softness that might be the enzyme's magic or the power of intimate connection. They lay like that for a while, breathing each other's air. Dim morning light crept through the portholes, illuminating the shine of sweat on their skin. At last she stirred, a gentle sigh escaping her. "How do you feel?" she asked, lifting her head. He managed a weary smile. "Incredible. Like I could take on an army." Then he grimaced slightly. "Or maybe just half an army. But it's a definite improvement." She laughed softly, resting her forehead against his. The sound of her laughter, low and breathy, was more precious than anything he'd ever salvaged. Her luminescence had settled into a contented glow, less urgent now, more like a gentle afterglow. A beep from the console shattered the fragile silence. She rolled off him, a cautious expression replacing the blissful calm in her eyes. He sat up with a wince, quickly pulling on his discarded trousers. "Power levels are stable," he muttered, scanning the screen. "We might be able to leave soon. But I need to see if the thrusters can handle it." She nodded, dressing in what little she had. The memory of her body was imprinted in his mind, a swirling masterpiece of luminescent color. As she stood behind him, leaning on the pilot's seat, he felt the warmth of her presence at his back. He fired up the engine diagnostics. The readout showed severe damage to the secondary thrusters, but a faint flicker of green indicated the primary engines might still function. Fuel was critically low, but maybe enough for short flight. If I can coax these engines into giving us a short burn, we can break Atmo and call for help, he said, glancing over his shoulder at Kryn. She pursed her lips. And then what? He sighed, rubbing a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. Then we hope someone friendly answers. Otherwise, we find a safe place to set down. Unless you have somewhere else in mind? She considered for a moment, reaching out to gently stroke his arm. I have contacts scattered across the sector, she admitted. Other exiles, sympathetic clans. But it's not guaranteed safety. The slavers or corporations might be watching. He flipped a few more switches. We don't have many choices. Let's get airborne first, then figure out our next step. They strapped themselves in. He guided Kryn through the co-pilot console, where she might assist with power distribution. The shuttle rumbled, shaking off months of disuse. Dust rained down from overhead panels as the engines whined. Kryn's face tensed with worry, but she followed his instructions with steady hands, redirecting energy flows. Ready? He asked, eyes locked on the flickering readouts. She nodded, swallowing. Do it. He engaged the thrusters. The shuttle jerked, vibrating as it lifted off the ground. Outside, the rocky plain fell away, dust swirling in the engine's wake. They rose unsteadily, the hull groaning. At any moment, Rovan feared the engines might fail. Yet they persevered, breaking through low-lying clouds into a pale sky that brightened with the rising sun. The horizon curved, the planet's battered surface sprawling below. His heart pounded as he angled the nose upward, pushing the engines harder. Static crackled over the comm then, a stroke of luck. A faint beep indicated they'd reached a viable altitude for short-range transmissions. Kryn toggled the comm panel. Anyone receiving? This is an independent vessel requesting safe harbor. Coordinates. She looked at him, and he rattled off the approximate location. Her voice, though tense, held the echo of hope. Silence answered. Rovan's chest tightened. He tried not to imagine the possibility that no one would respond. If they couldn't refuel or find a stable orbit, they'd crash back to the planet. But then a burst of static flared, and a crackly voice came through. We read you, independent vessel. Identify. Rovan's heart soared. Kryn and he exchanged a hopeful glance. She keyed the mic. We're survivors from the outpost. Please, we need assistance, medical and resupply. Another pause. Then the voice returned, slightly clearer. Stand by for coordinates to a neutral landing site. We have limited resources, but we can offer temporary refuge. Relief crashed over Rovan, nearly making him dizzy. He stabilized the shuttle, turning to Kryn with a grin that betrayed his overwhelming gratitude and lingering affection. We're not out of the woods yet, but that's a start. She relaxed in her seat, lips curving into a soft smile. A start is all we need. They followed the transmitted coordinates, adjusting course. The planet's atmosphere buffeted the shuttle, forcing Rovan to wrestle the controls. Each jolt reminded him of how fragile their little craft was. Yet with Kryn's help regulating the power, they held steady, eventually gliding into a dusty canyon far from the outpost. The neutral landing site was little more than a makeshift encampment set against a rocky cliff. As they set the shuttle down, a handful of figures emerged from shelters constructed of scrap metal and tarpaulins. Cautiously, Rovan powered down the engines, exchanging a wary look with Kryn. Here goes nothing. They exited the shuttle together, stepping onto the rocky ground. Warm air hit them, carrying the scent of cooking fires and unwashed bodies. One of the figures approached, a tall, wiry man with a shaved head and a rifle slung across his back. He eyed them suspiciously, then nodded. Heard your distress call. We're no charity, but you can rest here a while. If you cause trouble, you're out. Rovan nodded, raising his hands in a sign of peace. Understood. We just need a safe place to refuel and get some medical help. The man eyed Kryn with open curiosity, but said nothing about her species. He jerked a thumb toward a larger tent. Go see the dock inside. Pay her what you can. Rovan and Kryn followed the indication. The encampment was a motley collection of refugees, scavengers, and possibly renegades from various worlds. Some gave them wide-eyed stares, others ignored them. Inside the tent, a harried-looking medic worked over a makeshift operating table. She glanced up, scowling. What now? Rovan explained his leg injury and Kryn's need for a place to rest. The medic, after some bartering, agreed to trade her services for a few of the salvageable components from the shuttle's emergency kit. Kryn gently squeezed his arm, silently asking if they could afford it. He nodded. Her well-being, and his own, took precedence. After the medic replaced Rovan's bandage and gave him a stronger antibiotic, they found a small corner in the camp with enough space to lay out a sleeping mat. The day's heat grew intense, and they sheltered under a scrap canopy. Kryn winced at the sun's glare, possibly unaccustomed to such direct rays. He shielded her as best he could, offering water from a canteen. They sat there, side by side in the dusty shade, letting the surreal events of the past days sink in. Kryn wore a thoughtful expression, her glowing ridges dim in the harsh daylight. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her waist. Despite the crowd of strangers nearby, it felt oddly private, two exiles finding comfort in each other's presence. He pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "We made it," he said, still half in disbelief. She closed her eyes, a delicate smile curving her lips. "Yes. But there's so much more to do. So much uncertainty ahead." He exhaled. "We'll figure it out. One step at a time. I'm done running aimlessly." He thought back to how she'd risked everything for him. How they'd fought side by side, how they'd made love under the flicker of her alien glow. "I want to be free," he murmured. "With you." She opened her eyes, searching his face. Her hand came up, gently tracing his cheek. "I have always wanted freedom," she whispered. "To choose my path, my companions, my fate." A flicker of pink danced across her collarbones. "And to share it with someone who sees me." He saw her, all right. And wanted to see more. In the hush of that moment, surrounded by the clamor of a ragtag camp, they sealed their unspoken vows with a kiss. It tasted of dust and salt, of desperation and promise, a testament to the bond they'd forged in the depths of those ruins. Over the next few days, they worked on repairing the shuttle with whatever scraps they could scavenge or trade. The camp had a mechanic of sorts, a gruff older woman who took an interest in Kryn's luminescent patterns, asking endless questions about her biology. Kryn answered politely but guardedly, not fully trusting strangers with the secrets of her people. Rovan and Kryn slept in the shuttle at night, preferring its cramped privacy to the open vulnerability of the camp. Their intimacy grew bolder with each passing evening. Sometimes it was slow and tender, other times hungry and breathless. She continued to share her healing bond when his leg pain flared, though now it often led to a sensual exploration that neither resisted. In the flickering cabin lights, they discovered each other's bodies anew. He mapped every glowing ridge, every sensitive place, while she learned the contours of his muscles and the softness of his scars. They communicated through touch, breath, and the faint mental thread that ignited when they grew close. One night she did whisper those words again in his ear, half laughing, half panting. "Breed me slowly." It sent a shiver through him, a primal stirring. But he sensed it wasn't only a request for physical union. Beneath the surface, it spoke of a deeper yearning to create life, to shape a future. He didn't know if that was even possible, given their different species. But the idea lodged in his heart, a fragile seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could forge a life no longer shaped by exile and fear. He lost track of how many days passed in that dusty canyon. Each dawn, they bartered for parts or supplies. Each dusk, they returned to the shuttle, checking the progress of repairs. He taught Kryn the basics of reading Terran flight manuals, and she shared bits of her people's knowledge about biotech that might improve the shuttle's systems. Their bond was equal parts banter, blossoming romance, and quiet determination. At last, the mechanic declared the shuttle space-worthy, albeit barely. "You can get off this rock, but don't expect a smooth ride," she warned, wiping grease from her hands. Rovan thanked her, packing up their meager belongings. He glanced at Kryn as she carefully folded the few scraps of cloth she used as clothing, noticing how she'd integrated small bits of local fabric to craft a new, more practical outfit that still revealed her glowing ridges. She caught him staring and lifted an eyebrow, lips curving. "You're watching me again," she teased. He grinned, stepping close to slide an arm around her waist. "I can't help it." She pressed a kiss to his jaw, her voice soft. "Let's go, then. A whole galaxy waits." They climbed aboard, sealed the hatch, and ran the pre-flight checks. The engine's hum was ragged but steady. As the shuttle lifted, dusty wind kicked up around them, scattering the makeshift camp's tarps. A few of the refugees looked on, some envious, others relieved to see them go. Rovan guided the craft higher, until the canyon shrank below. Once they were clear of the atmosphere, he keyed in the star chart. Kryn leaned over his shoulder, eyes wide at the expanse of starlight. "Where will we go?" she asked, voice hushed. He studied the display. "There's a neutral trading station a few parsecs from here, or we could head toward the frontier, where the corporations have less control." He flicked a glance at her. "What do you think?" She rested a glowing hand on the console. "I think we should find a place to lay low, gather resources, and then, maybe we can search for more relics of my people. Perhaps even help them if they're in hiding. And you might find a new purpose besides scavenging." Her words sparked a sense of direction he hadn't felt in years. "Yeah," he said, turning to brush his fingers against her cheek. "That sounds good." She smiled, a radiant glow lighting her ridges. He set the coordinates for a frontier system rumored to be a haven for free traders and exiles. The engines flared, propelling them forward into the stardusted blackness. Side by side in the cramped cockpit, they watched the planet recede behind them, replaced by the infinite possibilities of open space. He reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. She laced her fingers through his, the swirl of pink bright along her wrist. They didn't speak, but the warmth between them said more than any words could. They were two exiles forging a new path. Their bond was fragile, but it was theirs, and it was real. He would never forget the way she looked at him, luminous and determined, in that moment. He realized, with a surge of emotion, that he didn't want to just survive anymore. He wanted to live. He wanted to see her laughter and hear her voice echo in the corridors of a new home, a place they chose together. He wanted to discover if their love could truly bridge species, if they could nurture a life that transcended exile and regret. Yes, he thought as he eased the shuttle into faster-than-light travel, feeling the subtle vibrations beneath his feet. They had risked everything for this chance. He didn't know what obstacles lay ahead, but with Kryn by his side, he felt an unshakable faith that they could face anything. Perhaps that was what real freedom tasted like, the open stars, the promise of a better tomorrow, and the tender, fierce glow of the alien woman who had stolen his heart.